Well, all right, all right, all right. Welcome, everybody. Another episode of Legend Sports and Amplify. We're here once or twice a week talking Negro League baseball history, all those passions and pursuits that go along with it. And I am really thrilled today to have on the man who was pretty instrumental in getting my passion started with the Negro Leagues way back in 1992. Dr. Bob Hieronimus and Laura Cortner. How are you?
Hi.
And Laura is extremely important in this process.
I know she used to. We've had a couple. We've emailed back and forth. This is going to be fun to hear both your stories. So yeah. Uh,
Yeah, thanks for having us. I know Bob has a lot to say from a personal point of view, and I'll be here to supplement with details.
awesome,
And
awesome. So
I'm a,
I mean, you are a longtime author and researcher, artist, muralist, social advocate, all sorts of other things. Radio personality. Your work to me is legendary beyond this. But the work that you started way back when with the Negro Leagues and that advocacy has been really really important. And I know it's important to you. How did that all come about?
it came about from my father, my stepfather, who not only was into managing baseball, but boxing, football, soccer,
Wow.
etc. As a matter of fact, he had so many problems with his wife, which is my mom at that time, because these players would come and hang out and come in with their cleats and everything else. And so my mom at that time threw them all out. She got rid of them, which was unfortunate. You know, Uh,
What time period are we talking there? What years?
this is uh,
1950, 51,
50, yeah, 50, 51,
early 50s.
yeah.
Okay.
Um, but where was I going in that?
You were saying that your stepdad introduced you to Negro League Baseball.
Yes, yes. And he said, "You want to see the greatest baseball, period." And I said, "Of course. We got Mickey Mantle and all this other stuff." "No, that's not what we're talking about," Dad said. That these are African Americans, and they were incredibly great, not just good, but great.
Hmm.
They out hit. Well, you know that they. When I interviewed Ted Williams and talked to him about this, he basically came out. He was the man that said, "You've got to look at the
Yes.
Negro Leagues. You must." And of course, they kind of ignored him for a long time.
Hmm.
Then then when it came breaking through with my father, he said, "I want to take you to a game." And I said, "Well, where is it going to be?" "Up in Pennsylvania." That's where I had. Actually, I found out later on I was born in Shamokin, Pennsylvania. Never
Oh,
knew.
that's not far from where I grew up. Yeah, I
Oh,
know where I
great.
know exactly where Shamokin is. Not far from Wilkes-Barre, Scranton, where I grew up. Yeah,
Coal
yeah,
mining country.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yep.
I think Dr. Bob was destined to be a coal miner,
that's most that's what they
but he
basically wanted
escaped.
to. I did escape. I had to.
Hmm.
Uh, but we were with it.
So he took you up
So
to the Scranton area for a baseball game.
yes, and he said, I said, "I've heard that there are lots of fights at these games. That there's anger and the problems." And he said, "Well, there ain't going to be where we're going because they don't do that up there. But
Hmm.
you'll see for yourself." So when we went up there and they were beating this white team, a steel
Mining,
steel mining
sort of a
team.
barnstorming
Yeah,
or
barn. Yeah,
Hmm.
local.
and they were tough. I mean, they were mean. And the people were going crazy over the fact that there's blacks and they're going to be playing whites.
Hmm.
That was more or less to them like,
So you heard a lot of anger in the crowd.
yes, we heard that anger all the way through. And the sad part was is well, the black guys were beating them 18-3, and they were backing off, which meant they were
Hmm.
not long. They were no longer trying to.
Hmm.
They knew that if they beat them too bad, that would be the end. So
You know,
unfortunately,
that story though, it brings back so many memories to me in these conversations that I've had because I think the one thing besides the history of these players and teams that people I hope are starting to get an idea of is that those games were everywhere across the country. These teams spread the brand of baseball from all to all corners of the continent and beyond. I mean, they were so instrumental, into Latin America. My wife is formerly from Guadalajara, Mexico, and they all know the Negro Leaguers. I'm going in a couple weeks down there to try to find. To Aguas Calientes to try to find Wild Bill Wright and some stories about him, who was a star in the
oh, boy,
1940s. So yeah. So I mean, when you talk about that story, that's an important part of not just baseball history, but our history as a country. This is what was going on through the 30s, 40s, even before that, but 30s, 40s, 50s, into the 60s. I saw the Clowns play in Scranton in like 1975. They were still doing that barnstorming. So yeah, it's a great history that I hope people appreciate and understand. The importance of the
Right.
Negro Leagues.
They would travel all the time. They would go wherever they could to play a ball game to make a little money since they weren't able to play in the big stadiums and do
yeah.
it the white major league way. They were on the bus
Hmm.
all the time. They'd play 2 and 3 games in a day, hop on
Hmm.
the bus.
That's right.
A story that Bob often tells about his stepdad is how worried you were about a riot at the end of the game.
Yes, because yeah,
But your dad said, "Don't worry, just watch, just wait." And at the very end of the game, the black players were on that bus and out of
Thank
town.
God.
Time to
couple of minutes
They
they
had
were
it
gone,
all practiced.
and
They knew
so
exactly what they had to
and
do.
so the whole crowd was going, "What? Where are they going?" They were going to do something, but they couldn't. There was no time.
Yeah.
And that's dad. My dad said that that's the way it always is. They they know that they got to get out of there if they see that kind of anger
Hmm. And I
from.
imagine in certain places in the country it was even more. Yeah, you talk about things like the Green Book and places where they could travel. It's just, how did it happen? I don't know, but to not talk about it and tell these stories and have people understand, to me, you have to. It's an important part of our country's history, not just baseball history. So when did you finally decide that you were going to try to do some actual advocacy for the Negro Leagues?
I'm trying to think of the actual year,
That would have been
1992,
early 90s.
Hmm.
early 90s.
That's when I met you. There was a whole bunch of people there, but but I was working in Scranton for the Red Barons, and that
Really?
benefit night. That benefit night in 1992, there was also that same weekend. Reggie Jackson sponsored a home run derby contest. All the Negro League players that were there. There was Double Duty Radcliffe, Lester Lockett, Josh Gibson Jr., Buck O'Neill, Jimmy Crutchfield, a number of others that were there. That when I got to sit, they were there the whole weekend. When I got to sit and hear these stories, I was just like I said, I was fascinated, and ever since
Wow.
then I have not stopped. So
Well,
it's been something.
they told the greatest stories. They could
Oh,
relive those games as if they were yesterday, some 40, 50 years ago. And then I threw it to you and you threw it to him. And then they knew all the details. It was as if
They had great
somehow,
memories.
I don't know how you got aware, you became aware that we had in here in Baltimore a potential Hall of Famer who was still alive, Leon Day.
mm-hmm.
I guess you learned that he was here and he was living in Baltimore and that there was an academic campaign through SABR, Society for American Baseball Research. And that's how you met Todd Bolton, who's a
Yeah,
member of SABR and had written all the white papers that you needed to demonstrate that Leon Day belonged in the Hall of Fame. And
Huh.
he was pretty much the only one still living. He was top of the list of the ones who were still living. So there was this minor advocacy campaign going that Bob joined and grew much bigger due to his presence in the media. And that's around the same time that they formed a union, so to speak, the Negro
Mm-hmm.
Leagues Baseball Players Association, and started doing a lot of the activities that you described, or where Bob met you in Pennsylvania,
Mm-hmm.
doing shows, bringing it out to the public, doing signings and baseball card shows, selling cards, and There was even at the All-Star game was held in Baltimore in 1993,
Yeah.
and they invited a lot of baseball, Negro League
Awesome.
baseball players. That was a big event. They had them all out there on the field for a game,
Yeah.
and a lot of signings, and that started taking them to the White House. That was one of Bob's big things.
Yes.
Players.
With President Clinton and Al Gore, right?
Right, and
Yeah.
George Bush before them. George Bush actually met them in the Oval Office.
Oh, wow.
That was a,
Wow.
he was a baseball player.
Yes, he was. Yeah.
So he was particularly thrilled to meet these guys, and
Yeah,
that's
he
his era.
was.
He knew exactly who they were.
What
Cool.
they, when they came to the White House, the president at that time, whom I
It
wasn't,
was George Bush.
Yeah.
Yeah.
who I wasn't too happy with, but he stayed with them through about 2.5
Mhm.
hours,
Wow.
and
Yeah.
that shocked everybody.
Right.
I mean, because that doesn't happen.
Mhm.
Usually, they'll give you 10 minutes and they're gone.
Take pictures.
And the
go.
players, because they they
Wow.
were allowed to go wherever they wanted to in the White House.
Yep.
They would go into the president's
They
room.
did. They sat behind his desk.
Sat behind his- I
They
mean,
had a ball.
Bush was
Oh
just
my goodness.
he was great.
He was very gracious.
I mean, he was so different than I thought it was going to be. So, and he was kind. He was kind. I never thought of him as kind and all that, but he was to these guys, to let them sit in his chair, put their feet up on his desk, and things of that nature, and smile about it.
Uh-huh.
One of the great things about the Negro Leagues is they're real big family. They are
Mhm.
one big family, and that is the key, because they can work together and hold each other up to what's
Boy.
what the hugest problems in the world, which
Mhm.
we still got racism. This is
Mhm.
unbelievable.
Mhm. I know.
I mean, how can you possibly be a Christian and put down a black person?
Mhm.
You
Mhm.
can't, but we do it.
I know. Like I said, it's important that these stories are told, because you know what? Like history has tendency to kind of repeat itself if you forget about what happened, and it's important to tell these stories. You were telling me a great one about the day that Leon Day found out he was elected to the Hall of Fame.
Oh, yes. Well, I had to deal with. Did I tell him the whole thing?
Well, yeah, you have to give a little background to that
Oh,
before you get
yeah.
into how he learned about it. And the fact is that, as I say, he was eligible in the early 90s, and he
Mhm.
was being voted on and getting rejected, and
Yeah.
being voted, you're going to make it in this year, Leon, we promise, and getting rejected. So he had about 3 or 4 years of promises being broken, and he was really fed up with it.
He was
As
going to quit.
his
He was gonna
widow,
quit.
Geraldine, will tell the story very well. She's like, you know what they're doing, honey? They're waiting for me to die. That's what they're waiting for.
Maybe
And
so.
I think that applies to what we were saying earlier. I think before we started recording, that the recognition to these ball players was so long delayed.
Mhm.
And Bob could tell how he went up against the Baltimore sports writers, and
Oh,
they just would not listen. And their
They would
minds were
not
made
listen.
up that the Negro Leagues were inferior. They did not hit
Boy.
on the same record levels, and they had inferior equipment, inferior whatever. They just, no, it's not happening. They don't belong in the Hall of Fame.
Mhm.
So he had that prejudice to break down, which I think you
Well-
did quite successfully.
Well, we had to challenge the bigger guy.
Yeah, the
John,
broadcasters.
the
Yeah,
broadcast.
but the
Well-
Hall of Fame also. You mentioned Ted Williams at his acceptance speech. He made a
Mhm.
point saying, "This is ridiculous. You're not letting in some of the best ball players just because they didn't play white major league
Mhm.
baseball." And so they started letting them in sort of a token fashion, right? One a
Mhm.
year, and then they stopped after 12, I think
That's
it was.
right.
And
Yeah.
then there was a long drought before
Mhm.
they let Leon in eventually. I
Mhm.
think they were done. They said, "We've done our part. We've put in this token a number."
Mhm.
I don't know that they had that discussion, but I think that was the mindset.
Mhm.
And so then they had this special arcane voting committee that was so unfair to these ball players getting in. They added them in with the umpires and the 1800 fellas, and whether or not they got in was very sketchy. So by the time Bob stepped in and really started pushing the Hall of Fame, you've got to do this before he dies. You've got to do this. and getting a lot of media attention because of his connections, and befriending Leon. That was the most important thing. So that's where you can start telling the story of the year that he made it in, 1995.
Was well, at first it was going. We thought the same thing was going to happen again, that he was not going to get in voting. And so obviously I just forced my way in talking about these things over and over again, whether people wanted to hear them or not. Being a little guy, I'm only 5'5", something like that. And the people that would oppose me were 6, 7 feet. I mean, these guys, no, really, you know, they're looking down on me. What the hell do you know? You're just a little kid. Well, you don't know this stuff. You know, just because I have 2 PhDs, I don't know anything. You know, it's really too bad when you have to always deal with that kind of thing. But fortunately, through prayer, through meditation, and service to others, that's inside of me. That's inside allowed me to be able to continue, because those 3 things: prayer, talking to the deity, meditation, listening to, actually talking to the deity, right? And then finally, this thing called service is key. That one, has a lot to do with Woodstock from the standpoint too. All of this, you know, they're all involved in
projects. But Buck O'Neill with the Negro League Baseball Museum also was befriending Dr. Bob at this time, and he worked closely with him during that voting session, because Bob was like, don't lead him on and disappoint him again. The year before, Campanella was on the vote committee and he missed it because he was sick. And so Phil Rizzuto got in. They made this kind of political deal. We'll put Phil Rizzuto in this year and we'll put Leon in next year. So that was it. Leon said, I'm not going to get excited about this ever again. But O'Neill convinced us it's going to happen. It's really going to happen.
Yeah.
But Leon was so nervous about it. And by this time he was really sick. He was in the hospital. He was having heart failure. But when they were voting, he was in the hospital, and they brought in the media. They brought in the local media because the word got out that he was going to get in, but still he didn't believe it. And he made this deal with Dr. Bob. He said, Dr. Bob, you come over and you tell me before those cameras come on me if I made it in or not, because I don't want to be all disappointed on camera again.
More sure than that.
So they wheeled him out.
Well, the deal was basically, he wanted me to tell him directly when he didn't get in, because that's what he expected. It was obvious to me at that time that he was so hurt that he was just dropping it, and, you know, from that perspective, because it was a mean thing that was going on there. It was a long time for such a kind guy and for such a great player. You know, he was one of the greatest pitchers ever. You know, ones that everyone, well, there are a lot of people that have not known much about him, but after they start seeing his records and what he has accomplished, then it changes. But the thing was, he did not want to be embarrassed. And so, I mean, even though when I've talked about this before, I couldn't tell the whole truth. But he was basically saying more or less, Bob, if I am going to listen to you, because I don't want to listen to you, because I don't believe you, you're going to do this again. And I said, I promise you. And he said, okay, so you tell me when I get in. I want you to be the first person, because I know you're wrong and it ain't going to make any difference. So, you know, it was very strange from that standpoint, but the guy was just beat. He was beaten down so bad because, as you know, Campanella was his very, very dear friend. He expected to be put into the Hall of Fame through the vote of Campanella, who was not allowed to. That was a big mistake right there. They should have allowed him to vote. vote at that time. It would have made all the difference in the world. Leon would have been still alive, and he would have been able to carry this thing through with some pride about it.
And actually make some money. That's the tragedy of Leon Day's story, is he did get in that year in 1995, and they were wheeling him out of the one room into another room where all the people were waiting to hear him, and he calls across the hall, Dr. Hieronimus. He didn't call him Bob, Dr. Hieronimus. So he runs over and he whispered, "You're in." And Leon goes, "Oh shit."
He was reborn.
Yeah, and then they did it all over again for the TV cameras.
And he didn't necessarily believe it at that time. He's always been so disappointed.
You were
that time. If he didn't get in, was he going to give me the speech?
No.
Now you are still doing work around Leon Day today, right?
Yes.
Yeah, well, Leon is one of the best players in the Negro Leagues. He could play every position. He played every position except for catcher. Except for catcher.
Except catcher, yeah.
Except for catcher, because apparently he couldn't keep his eyes from closing when that ball was coming at him.
Is for real?
Baseball Museum, they've got those bronze statues of 9 players, and they've got him in the right field, but they could have had him anywhere.
Anywhere,
yeah. He was on the mound. He was unstoppable, and they say he beat Satchel 3 out of 4 times. But again, Mrs. Day will tell you he actually beat him that 4th time too. But they didn't, because Leon was brought in at the end and he wasn't officially a pitcher, so they managed to wipe that one off the record. But he actually did beat him 4 out of 4 times. If you're going to beat him.
Wow. So what's going on with Leon Day? There's going to be another celebration, a statue, something else coming up, right?
Joined and formed a committee to build a statue to Leon Day and hopefully put it down there at Oriole Park.
Cool.
They have other statues down there of famous Orioles. They have a street sign dedicated to him down there, Leon Day Way. But that's basically it. He's got a baseball field here that some little leagues play on, but Baltimore needs to recognize him as one of the best ball players that has ever been in the city, from our city. He was born in Alexandria, Virginia, but he moved to Baltimore when he was 6 months old, so we can claim him as our very own. And they do have a special day that they made after him, but they need something lasting. So that's why Bob got into this statue. And what he's done is organized all his memorabilia, and he's going to put it up for sale. We do have a website already that's mostly functioning. The Leon Day, it's called LeonDayStatueProject.com, that people can find some of the memorabilia that you've got for sale that will go directly to the proceeds for this fundraiser, which is going to be enormous. We'll have to raise something like $100,000 to get this thing put up, a life-size bronze statue in place.
I will definitely. You'll have to send me that. I will definitely put something out and make sure more people find out, because there's a lot of people who are into collecting history, baseball history, that would be really appreciative of seeing some of these things. Now you also are. Did you have something to do with the Simmons Museum in Owings Mills, right?
Yes. As a matter of fact, we're waiting for there's another event coming up sometime in about a couple of weeks. We hope that's on the Negro Leagues again.
They've actually added an exhibit on the House of David.
Yes.
Nice.
Which is a unique, very well. It's a unique element from. It's not part of the Negro Leagues. They did have a Black House of David team, but I think
they sure did.
Copycats. These were religious separatists, I just will call them. They had separate community. They believed in celibacy, so I think the leader decided to organize athletics in order to keep young men busy.
That's exactly
You're
right.
interesting point, right? Because Satchel Paige even played on the House of David. I don't know if he put a beard on or figure. Babe Ruth, way back in the day. You see there's a picture floating around out there of Babe Ruth with the fake beard on because he was playing for the House of David. Yeah, that's a great story, and they barnstormed all over the place. A lot of authors and writers, researchers that I've talked to, kind of stepped on stories in their hometown, like we're talking about, by accident. I've talked to many of them that, one day they're in their area, their hometown, they're passing through, they see a picture, they see something, and they go, "What's that all about?" And then they find out that, yeah, back in the 20s, 30s, there were barnstorming tours, there were local teams, like you pointed out, with your story about Shamokin and your father. Those local teams played these Negro League barnstorming teams all the time, constantly for decades, and so there's not too many places they didn't pass through and play. So a lot of the research and writing that people do centers around something that happened in their hometown. It's there. If people look around, it's there. It's somewhere that you'll find it. So, uh, what what do they have at the Simmons Museum currently besides that?
Well, I haven't seen that museum for at least 3 years, so I know it's changed a bit. But right now, they're emphasizing. As a matter of fact, they're using one of my shirts. What was my shirt?
Mhm.
Again?
I don't remember which one it is, but they have a lot. They
Hold
have a
up,
nice
no. It
collection.
was what you were just talking about earlier.
The House of David.
House of David, right? Because that's one of the only uniforms I got,
Uh-huh.
which I had to give away. I hope I get them back. So that's coming up, because you never can tell. Plenty of times when you're asked to donate this and donate that, and you're supposed to get it, many times you never get
Yeah.
it back.
But
And that's the reason why not too many people do that anymore.
they have a nice display. They have
Yeah.
displays on different players, and they have some artifacts. They have some originals and some signed things. It's really nicely presented. They've done a really good job with it.
I would love to have somebody from there on to talk about what they've got. If you've got somebody I could reach out to, because these are, I mean, I'm going to have on next week. The Bing House in Florida is a National Historic place. It's on the register. It's in right outside. I think I want to say Winter Haven, somewhere down that way. And it's a house that dates back to the 19 teens and 20s, when obviously everything was segregated, Jim Crow. You couldn't, African Americans couldn't stay in white hotels, so they opened hotels of their own. And so this hotel was instrumental in Jackie Robinson's story, where he stayed when he was in the area playing. They have a whole display up. They're bringing back that history to tell those stories. And so I love finding these little places that are local, so that people can hear about them. Otherwise, you know how it is, right? Sometimes you probably run into this. You don't want to always feel like you're talking into space, right? That there's actually people who are seeing and hearing these things, and getting something out of it. It's important. I think that people hear these stories.
We also have here in Baltimore the Babe Ruth Museum. They
Yeah.
they expanded for the year 2000. They had a much bigger sports legends museum, and they had all the different sports from Baltimore, Maryland connections, and they had a really nice Negro Leagues section there. So I think in the Babe Ruth Museum they still have some tributes to the Negro Leagues,
Yes,
which is much smaller. That's his birthplace.
Yeah.
In one of those.
Tomorrow, did you ever get to meet Pedro Sierra in your
Yeah.
in your travels? I'm going to have him on tomorrow. We're going to have a conversation about his baseball life and story tomorrow. It's going to be a lot of fun. But there are a lot of people out there that, okay, so Jackie Robinson comes along in 47, and the Negro Leagues begin that slow, downbound kind of train, and they last through into the 60s, but they're really, the people aren't following it like they used to, because the better players are going into Major League Baseball. But there's a lot of players who played in that era that are still, many of them, I don't want to say many, but there's still some with us. And I'm hoping that I can have more of these guys on, I think, in the near future, that in talking to Pedro, several other people that I know, I'm going to try to have them on to tell their story as well, because it's more than that. I mean, I don't know, do you remember how many other guys that you traveled around with in that 92? Do you remember? I can remember at least 6 or 8. They made a card set of the whole group, but Who else was part of that?
I want to say there were about a dozen of them. There was Wilmer Fields.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
A lot of Philadelphia stars. There was Gene Benson,
Ah. Yeah.
Manning, Stanley Glenn, all really good players.
Mm-hmm.
Wilmer Harris, um, Jimmy Crutchfield.
Jimmy Crutchfield. Yeah.
That's right.
And Josh Gibson Jr. He was
Mm-hmm.
a lot.
He was a good guy.
Leon, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Leon.
I had his great grandson Sean on, one of my first guests, way back maybe last March or April, somewhere around in there, to talk about the Gibson Foundation that his grandfather Josh Gibson Jr. started, and about that whole effort. So, just great stories from everybody that I've talked to, that to hear this background and to keep these stories alive. It like you pointed out, it wasn't easy, because that what you said about the Baltimore sports writers, I've had those same conversations with people all the time. Well, they were AAA talent. They really weren't all that good. It's unfortunate.
Well, great that Major League Baseball, the white side, finally acknowledged that the Negro Leagues is part of the Major Leagues, and that their records are now encompassed into the all-time records, so that people are actually seeing those records.
Mm-hmm.
And how many people hit 400 in a season
Oh,
after Ted Williams?
yes.
There's many of them hit 400 in a season on a regular basis.
And one of them hit 500.
Yeah.
Close to it, yeah.
Mind-blowing when you actually sit down and start reading them.
Yes.
So many. Buck Leonard also was involved. I almost forgot. He was very good. And Buck O'Neill, of course, was involved tangentially from a distance. You mentioned something about artwork and theatrical performances, and that's another way that Bob, who's an artist at heart, that's how he... one of his murals has a huge portrait of Leon Day in it. It's called A Little Help from Our Friends, and you selected various heroes from different walks of life, different cultural endeavors that don't have anything to do with other than they're connected to Bob and inspiring him, and various people to inspire the community. So that gets a lot of notice. It's downtown Baltimore, and it's right on the it's gigantic baseball player, which is a picture of
beautiful. Very, very cool. I'll have to check it out. I don't get back to the East Coast as often. I mean, I guess I'm down here in Texas for about the last 25 years, but I still have a lot of family back there. One thing about growing up there, which was so cool, was I was only a few hours from everywhere. A couple hours to New York City. Philadelphia was only an hour away. Boston, Baltimore, Washington, D.C., Pittsburgh, all these places to go see baseball, all the games on the radio. I mean, it was just a great area if you were a sports fan to be able to follow all those teams that were up there. And then to come to find out all of this history that was there, because people tend to think of the Negro Leagues, the big teams, the Kansas City Monarchs, the Homestead Grays, the Crawfords, but it was in every corner of the country, New England, up into Canada, the West Coast. I mean, everywhere. And I just wish, I hope people take the time to look around, because it's probably there. There was probably a game or something that was played.
Your way.
What's that?
What was the Negro League team up your way?
The Philadelphia Stars were probably the closest big team, but Scranton, Pennsylvania had I want to say the years were maybe like 1910s into the teens. There was a Scranton Giants team that was sponsored by a African American. I think he owned a store of some kind in the area, and there were some big name players. Clarence Williams was I don't know if you're familiar with the name, but he's a turn of the century, late 1800s, early 1900s player who actually came and was like a player manager for that team. Nobody, I tell you what, I was the only one in Scranton, alive that ever even knew that. I would tell people that, they're like, wait, what? There was Negro League Baseball in Scranton, Pennsylvania? I said, yeah, we had a team here, believe it or not. So yeah, it is all over the place. So besides Leon Day, who are some more of your favorites? Who are some of your players that you really enjoyed about the Negro Leagues or the teams?
Well, Josh Gibson Jr., of course. Senior?
Yeah, Josh Gibson Sr. was the better player.
Well, that was with Josh Gibson.
You
I was
you
with his
mentioned
brother,
Buck
son,
Leonard a lot.
Buck Leonard. Buck Leonard, it was one of the kindest of all the people, and you know his averages,
Mm-hmm.
hitting over 400 4 times.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this was so amazing about these players. And
Yeah.
if I hadn't called, uh, what's his name? Ah, getting old.
Mm-hmm.
Come on, come on, come on.
What are you trying to say? You
Oh,
called somebody about Buck Leonard.
no, 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 no. No, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
No, it's not okay. There was something I was trying to save to talk about there, and during the process of everything else, I lost it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, anyway, Buck Leonard was a great player and a great gentleman. We have a number of good letters from him.
We've got, yes.
Some autographs.
We'll send you some
Boy.
of the letters.
Boy, I can't even imagine some of the things that you have been able to see and be part of and witness over the decades. I appreciate all of you guys who have been doing this work for such a long time. I mentioned Phil Dixon and Larry Lester, Rob Ruck, Don Rogerson. There's so many. Bob Kendrick at the museum in Kansas City. That legacy that they carry on. I mean, it's been beautiful to see the last year and a half how the people are starting to actually see and hear these stories, and the internet makes it great. I mean, the one thing there's a lot of nonsense on the internet, right? And so the only thing about the pandemic that I think came out of it that was good was people got to do things like this, right? People started to do Zoom calls and different things, and you because you couldn't go out anywhere, and so it actually finally got people to what it was supposed to be intended for, to bring people closer together, because you couldn't do this years ago. I mean, the odds of us ever talking like this are slim to none, right? But to be able to do this, I think it's a great thing. And then to watch these stories as they've hit. I mean, Bob is on, Major League Baseball games and all over. I mean, you hear him talk. It's just he's an amazing storyteller. And so to hear these stories and from the people who actually were doing it and have met these guys. I mean, you were there with Leon Day, Buck Leonard. I mean, it's just amazing to me.
Oh, thank you. I was really lucky. I
Mm-hmm.
really was, because Leon had been treated so poorly. Uh, it became, I became extremely angry
Mm-hmm.
over this, and that was one of the hardest things for me to do, is to shut my mouth about the meanness and the nastiness
Mm-hmm.
of some players, not players, but
The media, right?
I'm trying to think that guy's name, John. John, remember John? Anyway, John is very big in Baltimore at that time, and he was the guy that basically said that this is all BS.
Mm-hmm.
And because I was trying to convince him at one time to pay attention to the Negro Leagues. What I used to do is I had a bag, a literal bag, in which I put 5 or 6 of my books on the Negro Leagues.
Mm-hmm.
And I would ask them in the media, would you like some? No, no, they wouldn't. They didn't want to pay attention. But then, of course, when what comes out of their mouth is, hey, these guys weren't so good. They played little small ballparks. They had the quality of their bats and their balls and all that. It was that crazy things to criticize over this.
And what I find interesting about all that, right? If anybody can't see this, right? So Jackie Robinson comes along and changes the game. And from 1947 into the certainly the late 1950s, early 1960s, the majority of your award winners and all stars all came out of the Negro Leagues or Latin America, which had a pipeline through the Negro Leagues. There's no, I mean, there's no denying that. It's a fact. And so, when I hear these stories you're talking about with the Baltimore press, right? I've read so many stories over the years of, the people who had the keys to the kingdom, the commissioner of baseball, Kennesaw Mountain Landis back in the 20s, the Sporting News, J.G. Taylor Spink. They weren't doing anything to promote the Negro Leagues. In fact, many times they were doing everything, like you're pointing out, to suppress those stories. So to go out and tell these stories now, they need to be told 100 times more, because for 100 years they were not. Yeah, so it's important to keep telling them.
Yeah, and Buck O'Neill was so good at that,
Oh gosh,
and
yes.
he's finally getting in the Hall of Fame this year.
hmm
And I don't know if he's going in as a player or as a manager,
No,
but
not
I
as a
know
player.
Yeah, I think they've termed it pioneer or some sort of term for it. Yeah.
good spokesperson for the
Right.
whole idea.
Oh,
That Ken Burns documentary on baseball, I think that brought it to a lot of people that
Yes.
never heard of it before.
That's right.
That's right. That's right. I mean, that when I watched it, that episode that they did on the Negro Leagues, I mean, it was eye opening for a lot of people. And Buck O'Neill was such, like you're talking about with Leon Day, just kind of a gentle soul, and the way he went about doing it, and the stories and the way he told them. um, how could you not have appreciated it? I mean, I don't, I just, I'm always amazed when I still come across people that are the naysayers that are like, well, they were playing against lesser talent. Okay, well, wait a minute. How do you know that? I mean, you're making a pretty arbitrary judgment there. Yes, they were playing barnstorming games against local teams like we're talking about, but so did the major leaguers. They all did. It was a way to make money. That was really all it was all about. A way to make some money. So besides I mean, so you got the Leon Day statue. You're going to be having some of your memorabilia. You have to definitely give me that website so people can check it out. Anything else? What else you got? What else you got going on?
Well, let me finish that part in a second. The reason why we were going to just in Baltimore, you got to realize what Baltimore is like, and that is, it is not esoteric. It is just what do you call it?
Working class town.
Yes, but also has an edge to it, kind of. But the most important thing that I think is that when people start working together, like we are right now, we are now hopefully going to open up the minds of some people that would jump into this, because we need help from that standpoint. The economics of it is terrible, an aspect of it. And if it weren't for my wife, I don't think I could have continued going on, because she was a great sports lady herself, great at many different things. So that's what made a big difference when she's able to come up to the same players. They loved her. I mean, she was more or less like a child to them, a friend. And this it's bridging people who never get together, but now can and will, that's the reason why I'm much more positive about the future and this kind of thing. But we got to be smart enough to realize that if there's a chance for somebody to put us down, they will. And they'll say anything. Like, as I started say, I carried 4 books with me, and every time I would talk to someone, I was trying to get educated. Nobody would bother to look at them, and they were free. I would have given them for free.
Then they have deniability, right? They didn't read them, so they didn't really hear about them, right? So yeah, I guess that's kind of the way that works. I don't know. I don't get it. I don't get it. I mean, like I said, there was never and even the whole thing about me, it kind of, I don't want to say it bothers me. I'm glad they finally did it. It took them a while, but Major League Baseball finally making that announcement to recognize the Negro Leagues as Major League. All those years you talked about Babe Ruth, he played in the American League, right? never played against the National League. There was no need to do any kind of equivalency of his statistics from American League to National League. They were both major leagues. Now the Negro Leagues are major leagues, so there's no reason to try to like say, well, if he played in the major leagues, he would have done this. No, they are major leagues now. So what they did is what they did. So the statistics that you pointed out, and yeah, were the schedules a little haphazard? Did they not play consistent numbers of games and all that kind of stuff? Sure, yes, but there's reasons for that. But they're major leagues, and that's the most important thing about the last year. That anybody now who pushes back on it, well, they're major leagues.
The internet has made a big difference in the static, as statisticians have gotten carried away. The Negro
Boy.
Leagues stats have gotten so much better than they
Mhm.
were in the 90s because
Oh.
people have taken it upon themselves to dig through all the archives and then
Mhm.
post. So you've got seam heads,
Yes.
they're as accurate as you can possibly be,
Mhm.
and by fact. So it's not a question anymore. These are
Mhm.
valid records of amazing talent.
Absolutely. I was just going to point that out. You just brought it up about seam heads. I've had on Scott Simkis from Seam Heads, Gary Gillette, who's also done a lot of research and is involved in the Hamtramck Stadium, Adam Dorowski, who works with Baseball Reference. The work that they have all done to uncover these and continue, like you said, it's spurred other people because they have a network now of people who are, if they find something, send it to them because it needs to be vetted and added and continue to grow. And it's very, very cool to be able to see those kinds of things that it's kind of grassroots. It's not, it's because people are, that's how you're passionate, right? When you have that interest, it's more than just a job or something like that. You're doing it because you love it, right? I mean, that's what's kind of fun. Kind of what kept you going, right, Dr. Bob, all these years with the Negro Leagues?
Especially because knowing what kind of people you're dealing with. These are very kind people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. A different color, etc. I mean, I always go back to that because I've seen what's happened over the years with the players that I've tried to help. There are a number of guys that still need to get into the Negro League Hall of Fame,
Major League Hall
of Fame.
There are a number, yes, quite a few more.
And I hope they will continue with that. But baseball was played differently in the Negro Leagues, in the white leagues.
It changed. I mean, Jackie Robinson, like I said, he changed the game when he came in. It really did.
Yes.
He stole home. Nobody ever stole home.
It'd been a while, that's for darn sure. Yeah, the game was definitely a more exciting, I think, brand of baseball than just sitting around waiting for the home run, which is kind of what baseball has turned into now, unfortunately. Major League Baseball today, I'm not real big on that. It's nice to see when teams play a little bit of Negro League type of ball. That's been pointed out. It's been pointed out in broadcasts. There's been broadcasters who have said, "Oh, wow, that was like something you'd see in the Negro Leagues." Yeah. So it's interesting to, at least people appreciate and they know that brand of baseball that was being played. I mean, it's
acrobatic and
yeah. Hey, I mentioned earlier about the clowns, right? I saw them. I want to say it was somewhere in the mid to early '70s. I was a kid at the time, and my dad took me to go see them. They were playing, and at that time, and I think this is what got in people's heads. It was a show on top of just a baseball game. And they were good baseball players, but that kind of got lost in the show. And so I think a lot of people who maybe had seen those types of games, that's maybe where they got it in their head that the Negro Leagues was all about clowning and showmanship and stuff, and missed the fact that these guys actually could play. They were doing that because that was the entertainment. It was no different than I mean, why was that okay? But yet back in like the turn of the century, 1900, they had the Bloomer Girls, and there were guys like Hall of Famers, Tris Speaker, Rogers Hornsby. They were playing with women's teams. That was okay though. That didn't take away anything from their major league ability. So why should these guys, by the same token, they're putting on the show that people wanted to see. So it is what it is. Did you? So did you get to see any Negro League teams when you back when you were a kid?
Just that one. just that one up
Just
in
that one?
Pennsylvania. My father. But that's and then basically he was so involved in so many other sports, we never got back up there again. So I don't know much about that particular area, except that I realized at that time there were some people that really loved the game and the Negro Leagues, but there were also a number of others who knew nothing about it but were opposed to it no matter what.
Yeah, it didn't matter. Yeah.
It didn't make any difference. And those people, I tried to change their minds. That's the reason why I put so much time and money into both television and the radio and other places and lecturing, because at first nobody wanted to hear this. It was a kind of no kind of thing, because I don't think they really understood that in the Negro Leagues, when we're playing baseball with them, they threw at your head. And this is what we've heard so many times of players. You got to learn to duck first. That's the first thing. This is what Gibson and others have told, Junior and others have told me over and over again. So what was I going in there?
Well, the innovations, you're talking about that, right? I mean, the innovations because of that type of play, shin guards and batting helmets, and yeah, they all come from the Negro Leagues. I mean, it's yeah.
First time do a night game with lighting.
Yeah, no, so many things, so many things.
It was really well. You first started wearing a mining helmet out there because
right. Crazy. So you have, I mean, like I said, your work over the years has been outside of this. So it's no surprise to me that you were in on this with the Negro Leagues as long ago as you were, because you've always seemed to be ahead of the curve on a lot of things. Your work, your art, your research, the things that you do. 21st Century Radio. What do you talk about on 21st Century Radio? Tell us a little bit about that before we go.
Could look? You're talking to my boss here. No, I'm serious. I'm serious. This is a very intelligent. I'm embarrassed.
I know.
But it's important for the people that I ever work with to understand. They don't understand that this person is as smart as she is and work her ass off. Oh, I'm serious.
Awesome.
I produce the show. He does the interviews. He and his wife, who was just in here a few minutes ago, they co-host the show, and we go all over the place because we interview Negro Baseball League players as well as researchers on UFOs and counterculture and Woodstock, and consciousness is the theme, anything that will elevate the consciousness of humankind. So even if it's just learning about the Negro Leagues and how we have to lift ourselves up to appreciate them, that's one way of lifting your consciousness. But through concentrated studies as well, meditation you mentioned earlier, and service to others. So we do a lot of environmental awareness type of interviews, food safety, farm safety, the paranormal, anything from ancient history that has a bit of an unusual flair to it, like who built the pyramids and why are there pyramids all over the world and previous civilizations. So it's a mixed bag with that overall arching theme of consciousness studies. I guess
it's interesting because you said that about expanding and lifting yourself up, because I'll tell you what, people have asked me over the last year and a half, why are you doing that? Like having these kind of conversations, and because I think they're important, and I think that people need to hear about them. And I mean, I don't get anything out of these from any sort of standpoint as far as other than what I learn and hopefully be able to share them, that other people are watching them, and to me that's really the most important thing. It's something that it does make you feel different when you are doing these types of projects, because I think when people enjoy them, and as they do with the work that you've done over the years, there's something more to it than just getting something monetarily from things all the time. So
Absolutely.
The other things we tried to teach also was if you're going to ask for autographs, pay for them.
Yeah, that's not. I mean, these
Because
guys.
that was one of the biggest problems I had in the beginning, because a lot of people wanted to go with me to these events.
Ah.
Well, they would stay behind and then start pumping the player for sign this, sign that,
Mhm.
and everything.
Uh-huh.
And they would, of course, they would want to, because they'd love to do that. But you should pay them.
Mhm.
They need it. I mean,
Yeah, most of that stuff turned around on eBay, right?
on days, on the refrigerator,
Mhm.
dog food. That's what I saw, and it's true.
Mhm.
And he and his wife were in that kind of a situation. So when
Mhm.
I realized that they were actually being given this dog food by a relative, made it even worse, because it was ugly. It
Mhm.
really was. They had the ability to feed them.
Mhm.
It didn't work out
Well,
that
it
well.
hasn't been that way since he's been involved. He and
Oh, well.
Zoe, his wife, have made sure that
Mhm.
Jay, his widow, and his children and his
It's a
grandchildren
shame.
have gone to college and gone on to successful careers thanks to an enormous amount of cash infusion and
Well,
donations from the Hieronymus family. They sort of adopted them and took care of his family after Leon passed.
Well, let me
yeah.
tell you something, man. You and your work and yours, Laura. This work is appreciated. There's a lot of people out there that I hope more people learn about it, but it's appreciated. Uh, and I'm sure by these players and these entities that are involved with Negro League Baseball history. And like I said, personally, to me, if you weren't doing it, I wouldn't be having these conversations, because who knows when I finally get exposed to the Negro Leagues. I mean, it just hit me at a time when I was right out of college. I was kind of just doing my thing and working for the baseball team, and along came this event, and it kind of set me down a path that there's very few days that go by that I don't talk about it, do something, reading every day. I mean, every day on Twitter I try to put out something about a player that somebody doesn't know about, because people know about the Josh Gibsons and the Satchel Pages and even Leon Days. I'm talking about like Sugar Kane. I put out something today on a player who played back in the 1930s, 40s, and 50s that traveled around. So it's important. I'm hoping people get that. So, like I said, your work's appreciated. I personally am grateful for you and for you coming on here for what you've been doing. And so, thank you.
Well, we're
Well,
grateful for what you're doing. What you're
yes, that's
doing is
right.
keeping it going, a whole nother
In
Yes.
my
generation.
in my small way, I'm hoping. Yeah.
New format so that the younger people can continue
I'm
to hear.
trying. That's what I'm hoping to. I post it on. It streams on Twitch, which is like it's owned by Amazon now, but it's younger gaming type of thing. But there's other events that are on there as well. I post them on YouTube, although I don't promote that all that much, just for safekeeping, because Twitch only keeps them for about, I think, 60 days. But also on some other forums that I'm on, statistical forums, collecting forums, some other things, so people have access to them and can check them out, because. Yeah, these stories, there's so many of them, thousands of these stories that are, you can't count them. They're like stars in the sky. And there's so many great storytellers out there, but you can't talk about all of it. And the younger, like I said, it's important to me, my wife being a teacher, trying to get these to the younger audience as well. So,
Well,
uh,
I
like
was a teacher.
you were, what did you teach?
Well, I taught, let's see, at first I was teaching from second grade, third grade, fourth grade, etc.
Ah,
That's where I loved to teach,
that's what my
because
wife teaches, elementary school. Yeah.
wonderful things happen when you talk with children about
Oh
these.
boy. Yeah.
And that, but I had real trouble with the faculties, because in art, uh, I was trying to. A lot of the children looked like wanted to see my kind of work and what we were doing, and then they wanted to do something, not necessarily like it,
Hmm.
but thrilled that somebody else much older was with them to do these things.
Hmm.
And then if they ever saw me on television or wherever else, it lifted them up from that standpoint.
Hmm.
And so trying to bring people together ends up being the key thing for this whole thing about Negro League Baseball and
Hmm.
everything else. If we do not work together, we're going to be gone.
Hmm.
I'm serious about this.
I know.
We
I'm with you.
are in trouble. We are in big trouble, um, from the standpoint of being drowned
Hmm.
all around our continent, and all around almost every place that's near the water is
Hmm.
going to be challenged. Let's put it that way. And especially
Boy.
in Florida. In Florida, they're lucky they're going to be. I don't know how long Florida, at the very tip of Florida, that's
Do you
going to be
know?
away.
Do you know Jonah Winter, the author Jonah Winter? Have you
No.
ever met Jonah? He's probably around that same time period as you, but his mother was a children's book author and illustrator. He became one. He writes children's books for maybe middle school on down, illustrated, but not. And he did Negro League books. He does his own illustrations, but on all of these kinds of topics, climate change and historical figures, and touching on things like racism and other things. And that's, I mean, boy, oh boy, my wife being a teacher, these are kinds of books that some states are trying to take out of the curriculum. It's like, no, no, no. You need to have these in there because this is the type of material that younger readers need to be able to see and have exposure to. So I'm with you. I get it. I appreciate the fact you did that as well too as a teacher, because it's not easy being a teacher for sure.
I got in lots of trouble for that. We actually built little houses when I was teaching, and these sixth and seventh graders. We were able to uh, create a house on wheels. We had their parents, everybody else collecting wood, and
Wow.
then we would bring the wood in, and they would paint the wood, and we would end up building things with this. And after that, we got in trouble mainly because the children wanted to continue to work on things like that.
Hmm.
And you can't do that in art in schools, that
Hmm.
elementary schools and places that I was teaching at that time. But it makes a very big difference when
It
you
does.
have someone as one of my. I know what's interesting to me is, of the few years that I taught, I still hear from the people that still don't necessarily remember all the things that we did that got me kicked out, uh, because it was trouble.
But they remember you and they remember your painted cars. He
Yes.
has
Oh my
Uh,
God, the things. Oh my goodness, the things. We could have a whole nother conversation down the road one day about all these other things that you have done. They blow my mind. But this was so much fun. I appreciate it. Like I said, thank you for all the work you guys have done and continue to do. And we'll keep in touch. I'd like to get updates maybe that I could put out through these conversations with other people, and also on Twitter and other places, that as it's going along with the Leon Day and other projects you're working on. I think it'd be great. But thank you so much. This was so much fun. I deeply appreciate you guys taking the time to do it. Dr. Bob Hieronimus, Laura Cortner, thank you so much.
Thank you. And I'll
thank
send you
you.
that link to leondaystatueproject.com. You can add it to the interview maybe.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Don't go away. I'm going to sign us off. Bye bye.
Okay, thanks.